Imagine for a moment a small settlement nestled along the banks of a winding river, its humble beginnings as far from greatness as one could imagine. This is where Rome's story begins, not as a mighty empire, but as a collection of tribes, living simple lives. The early Romans were no different from the people around them, farmers, traders, warriors, living in a world where survival was the main concern. But here's the thing, listener. Even in these early days, something set the Romans apart. It wasn't their size, nor their power, but their resolve. Their drive to build something lasting, something far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Now close your eyes and picture this. Dirt roads, little more than paths between simple huts and fertile fields. The gentle hum of daily life mixing with the sounds of bargaining at the market. The air is filled with the scent of fresh bread, of fruits from nearby orchards, and perhaps the distant clang of metal as a blacksmith hammers away. This is where the future of the Mediterranean world would be shaped, not by the strength of armies, but by something much deeper, the spirit of unity, determination, and the belief that this small settlement would one day change the world. Can you imagine the feeling of being one of those early Romans? The excitement of something greater being born, even if it was just a quiet whisper in the air. Rome wasn't just built by strength in numbers, it was built by vision. The Romans didn't conquer with brute force alone. They adapted, they learned, and most importantly, they forged alliances. Picture those early Romans, not as warriors, but as diplomats, meeting with neighboring tribes, shaking hands under oak trees, and exchanging not just goods, but trust. Every decision, every treaty, was a step towards something bigger, a future where Rome would rule the Mediterranean. They were not just building a city, they were building a legacy that would someday echo in every corner of the world. Now let me ask you, listener, have you ever been part of something that felt bigger than yourself? Have you ever worked toward a goal so powerful that you felt it coursing through the very air around you? That's what the Romans felt. Though they could not see the empire they would one day create, they knew their unity had power. Each generation passed down their vision, and with every step, Rome became stronger. From these small beginnings, they built an empire that would span continents, touching the lives of millions. But it didn't happen by chance. It happened because of their relentless belief that they could build something lasting, something worthy of remembering. And so, the Romans continued to adapt, to learn, to grow. They weren't just conquerors, they were builders, innovators, creators. They learned from their neighbors, from the Greeks, the Etruscans, and anyone who could teach them. They didn't just seek to fight, they sought to understand. And in doing so, they laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the Roman Empire, a civilization that would rise to unparalleled heights. Imagine, listener, being there at the start of all this, a small settlement that would grow into the center of the ancient world. The Romans, though they could not see their future glory, knew they were destined for something greater. Every brick they laid, every alliance they forged, was a testament to their determination. And in the end, their vision became a reality. Part 2. The expansion of Rome, the struggle for dominance. As Rome grew, so too did its ambition. The small city-state on the banks of the Tiber began to set its sights beyond its borders. The surrounding tribes and cities that had once been allies now became potential threats, and the Romans, with their ever-growing sense of superiority, began to view themselves as not just another tribe, but a power that could shape the world around them. The Romans had tasted victory and tasted it sweetly, and like any great empire to be, they craved more. But what drives a people, a nation, to expand beyond their borders? What is it that ignites the flame of ambition and makes a small city-state desire to dominate the surrounding world? Is it the thirst for power, the promise of wealth? Or is it something deeper, something embedded in the very fabric of a culture, a desire for order, for structure in a chaotic world? The Romans were driven by all of these forces, but perhaps more than anything, they were driven by a belief in their own destiny. They saw themselves not just as another people on the map, but as a civilization that was destined to shape history. It was this belief, this unshakable confidence in their own future, that propelled them forward. The early Roman expansion was not just about conquering land. It was about imposing order on chaos, about bringing the Roman ideals of law, discipline, and structure to a fragmented world. The Italian peninsula, which had been a patchwork of warring tribes and independent cities, now found itself under the growing influence of Rome. What began as a series of small skirmishes soon escalated into full-scale warfare as Rome sought to unite the peninsula under one banner. But what made Rome so unique in its approach? Why was it that, out of all the tribes and cities in Italy, Rome was the one that managed to emerge as the dominant power? Was it simply because they were the strongest, the most ruthless? Or was it something else, something in their spirit, their determination, and their strategic thinking? You see, the Romans understood something that many of their contemporaries did not. Strength alone was not enough. It was not enough to simply conquer. To truly rise, to truly become a power, you needed more. You needed vision. You needed the ability to adapt, to learn from your enemies, to outthink them at every turn. This was the secret to Rome's success. Rome's military success was not due solely to their superior tactics, but also to their remarkable ability to absorb the best elements from every culture they encountered. Early on, Rome's leaders understood that a single tribe could not conquer the world. Instead, they sought alliances, forged treaties, and learned from their neighbors. The early Romans weren't just fighters, they were skilled diplomats, capable of turning adversaries into allies, turning enemies into friends. Rome's rise was a story not of brute force, but of strategic thinking and remarkable flexibility. But what would you do, listener, if you were in their shoes? Imagine, for a moment, being a leader in the ancient world, facing enemies from all sides, struggling to unite disparate tribes and cities under one banner. Would you turn to brute strength, or would you look for the most diplomatic path? In the case of Rome, they did both, but with an eye on the long-term goal of unity. The Romans knew that conquering land was just the beginning. The true challenge was integrating the conquered, turning them into allies, making them part of the Roman system. And this, I believe, was one of the greatest achievements of Rome, its ability to adapt. Rome did not simply conquer and move on. No, it absorbed, it adapted, it made use of the skills and knowledge of the peoples it conquered. The Roman Empire was not just built on military might. It was built on the assimilation of cultures, on learning from the best, and on turning each conquered tribe into a valuable part of its system. This ability to absorb and integrate is what allowed Rome to grow into the empire it became. As the city grew, so did the ambitions of its people. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about creating something lasting, something powerful. The Roman citizens were not just concerned with their own day-to-day lives. They were thinking, about legacy. They knew that their actions would ripple through the ages, shaping the future of the Mediterranean world and beyond. The names of those early leaders, though long since forgotten by many, lived on in the stones of Rome's monuments, in the laws they enacted, and in the spirit of determination that infused the very air of the city. But there were other factors that made Rome's rise inevitable. The Romans' belief in their own destiny was matched only by their ability to adapt to the challenges of the world around them. They learned from the Greeks, from the Etruscans, and from every other culture they encountered. The Romans were quick to adopt the best ideas, not just in terms of military strategy, but in art, in philosophy, in governance. They did not seek to simply conquer. They sought to improve, to build, to create something that would stand the test of time. And as they did so, the foundations for the Roman Empire were laid. It would not happen overnight. It would take centuries of struggle, of war, of diplomacy, and of growth. But Rome's story, from its humble beginnings as a small settlement on the banks of the Tiber to its rise as one of the most powerful empires in history, was driven by the determination and unity of its people. The greatness of Rome was not inevitable, but it was made possible by the vision and the efforts of those who believed. Part 3. The Punic Wars, Rome's first true test. Rome's growth could not go unchallenged. As the city-state expanded its influence over the Italian peninsula, its eyes turned toward the Mediterranean world. The wealth and power of the Carthaginian Empire loomed over Rome like an ominous shadow. Carthage, an ancient city-state in North Africa, with its vast naval fleet and thriving economy, was the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Their control over trade routes and resources made them the perfect rival for the ambitious Romans. The stage was set for a clash of civilizations: Rome, young and ambitious, versus Carthage, experienced and wealthy. But what was it, listener, that made Rome take on such a formidable adversary? Why, with so many enemies closer to home, did the Romans decide to face the giants of Carthage? Was it simply a desire for wealth, or was there something more at stake? Perhaps it was the growing pride of the Romans, who now saw themselves not just as a city-state, but as a force that could rival any empire in the ancient world. They had tasted success, and they were hungry for more. The Punic Wars, 3 brutal conflicts between Rome and Carthage, would be the crucible in which Rome's future was forged. The First Punic War, fought between 264 and 241 BCE, was the opening chapter in this epic struggle. At first, Rome and Carthage seemed to be evenly matched. Both had powerful armies. Both had their sights set on controlling the Mediterranean. However, Rome's strength lay in its ability to adapt. Unlike Carthage, whose military relied heavily on its formidable navy, Rome had a distinct advantage. Its legions, disciplined and resilient, were unmatched in land-based combat. The challenge for Rome, then, was how to leverage its strengths while overcoming Carthage's naval superiority. And so, in a stroke of military genius, the Romans began to build their own navy, using captured Carthaginian ships as models. Can you imagine the determination it took to build an entire fleet from scratch? The Romans, who had never been a seafaring people, now had to learn how to build and command ships, how to fight battles on the open seas. They were not born sailors, but they became them out of necessity. This is what set the Romans apart, an uncanny ability to adapt, to learn, and to use every advantage to their benefit. And so, with their new fleet in place, Rome set sail to challenge Carthage on the waters. But what was it that made Rome's military so successful? What was it about the Roman soldier, the legionary, that made him such a formidable force? It was not just training or equipment. It was the Roman sense of discipline, unity, and duty. The Roman legions, though not as large as their adversaries, operated like a finely tuned machine, with each man knowing his role and performing it to perfection. There was no room for disarray or hesitation. The legions marched, fought, and conquered with unwavering focus, their eyes fixed on their mission and their loyalty to Rome. The power of Rome's legions lay not in their brute strength, but in their discipline and cohesion. The first major clash between the two powers occurred at the Battle of Mylae in 260 BCE. The Romans, now masters of naval warfare, won a decisive victory. This was the moment when the Roman fleet, though newly formed, proved its worth. The Carthaginians, taken aback by the ferocity and cunning of the Roman attack, were forced to retreat. The battle was a turning point, one that marked the beginning of Rome's dominance in the Mediterranean. From that point on, the Romans would continue to win battle after battle, turning the tide of the war in their favor. But the Punic Wars were not just about military strength. They were about strategy, endurance, and the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. The Romans fought not only for glory, but for survival. Carthage, with its wealth and resources, was a formidable foe. But Rome's determination to defend its land, its people, and its future gave it an edge that Carthage could not match. The Romans understood that this was not just a war for territory. It was a war for the future of Rome itself. As the conflict stretched on, both sides suffered heavy losses. Cities were burned, ships sunk, and countless lives were lost in the relentless struggle. But what truly set Rome apart was its unbreakable resolve. The Romans fought not for short-term gain, but for the long-term survival of their city and people. In every battle, in every skirmish, they fought not just with swords and shields, but with the spirit of the Roman people, a spirit that could not be extinguished by defeat or hardship. The war, though costly, ultimately shaped Rome into an indomitable force. Imagine the toll this war took, listener. The years of fighting, the endless battles that stretched across vast distances, each victory hard won, each loss a reminder of the stakes at hand. The Romans, with their resilience, pressed on. Their leaders were not just strategists, but symbols of the Roman ideal: courage, strength, and endurance. It wasn't just about winning battles. It was about forging an empire, a civilization that could stand the test of time. The Romans were not just fighting for land or riches. They were fighting for the legacy they believed they were destined to create, and the cost of victory was great. The Romans suffered tremendous losses throughout the war. Ships sunk, soldiers lost, cities burned. But with each sacrifice, they grew stronger, more resilient. The endurance of the Roman people became legendary. It was a people who, despite setbacks, would never stop fighting. They fought on, knowing that their survival depended on their unity, their determination, and their unwavering belief in their destiny. The war finally ended in 241 BCE, with the Romans emerging victorious. Carthage was forced to sign a peace treaty, ceding control of Sicily to Rome and paying a heavy war indemnity. But the victory came at a price. The Romans had learned that, while military might could win battles, it was the spirit of the people, their determination and resilience, that would secure the empire's future. Rome's victory over Carthage in the First Punic War laid the foundation for the Roman Empire's rise to power, but it also set the stage for the conflict. A new world awaits the Romans, having proven themselves on the battlefield, were now ready to face a new challenge, their own growth. With the defeat of Carthage, Rome's influence stretched across the Mediterranean, but the city-state was still far from the empire it would one day become. Rome now found itself at a crossroads. Would it remain a republic, with its power and wealth limited to the Italian peninsula, or would it embark on the journey of imperial conquest that would shape the future of the ancient world? But what makes a city-state, once humble and small, decide to expand beyond its borders? Why, in the face of success, does a civilization feel the need to push forward? Is it the desire for riches, the need to control more land? Or perhaps, listener, it is something more profound, a deeper drive rooted in the human condition, the yearning to leave a legacy, to build something that transcends the present. This is precisely what Rome's leaders were grappling with, the question of whether to preserve the republic they had built or to push beyond its limits, to shape the world in their image. The early Romans had always been mindful of their identity as a republic, a system where power was not concentrated in the hands of a single ruler, but rather spread across the Senate and elected officials. The Roman Republic, with its system of checks and balances, was a unique experiment in governance. It was meant to ensure that no single person or group would become too powerful, and that decisions were made for the good of the city and its people. However, as the Roman world expanded, this system began to show its cracks. Why then did the Romans continue to expand despite the risks? Was it just the desire for glory, or did they see expansion as a necessary part of survival? The answer lies in Rome's values that blended a sense of pride with practicality. They were not simply seeking power for power's sake, but for the stability of their society, to protect their people and create a secure future for generations to come. But this drive came at a cost. The expansion brought with it not only wealth, but complexity. Rome would need to adjust its system of governance to account for the vast territories it now controlled. The Republic's success had been based on a balance of power, but as the empire grew, so did the need for a more centralized leadership. Military generals like Marius and Sulla began to rise, their power and influence growing stronger as they led successful campaigns. Rome's military prowess was undeniable, and it was this military power that allowed the city to grow and expand. But as these generals grew more powerful, the balance of power within the Republic began to shift. The Senate, once the ultimate authority, began to lose its grip, and the idea of a single ruler, a dictator, started to become more appealing. Can you feel the tension, listener? Imagine, for a moment, being a senator in Rome, watching as the power of the Republic slips away from your hands. What would you do if the very system you fought to preserve was being undermined by the ambition of military leaders? Would you stand firm and fight to maintain the status quo, or would you yield to the pressure of change? For the Romans, this question was not just theoretical, it was a matter of survival. And the answer, as we now know, would be the rise of one man, Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a man of extraordinary talent and ambition, and he was not content with the traditional limits of Roman power. As he marched his legions across Gaul and beyond, he gathered strength and support from his army, the people, and his political allies. Caesar understood that in order to truly secure his place in Roman history, he would need to break from the old ways of governance. In 49 BCE, with the famous words, "The die is cast," Caesar crossed the Rubicon River and defied the Senate, plunging Rome into a civil war. This was the moment when the Republic, which had lasted for centuries, began to crumble. Caesar's march on Rome was not just an act of rebellion, it was the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic. As Caesar's power grew, so did the divisions within the Roman leadership. The Senate, once the proud defenders of the Republic, found itself at odds with the man who now held the true power. Caesar's victory was swift, and the old order was left in tatters. But even as Caesar's power reached its zenith, there was another question looming. What would happen next? Caesar, though he was named dictator, did not seek to become a king. He envisioned a new Rome, one that could maintain the spirit of the Republic, while embracing the necessary strength of centralized leadership. But his vision would not come to fruition. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators who feared the power he held. His death sent shockwaves through Rome, but it also marked the final death throes of the Republic. Caesar's assassination, however, did not restore the old order. Instead, it set the stage for the rise of Augustus, Caesar's adopted son, who would become the first Roman emperor. Augustus carefully consolidated power, deftly navigating the political landscape left by his predecessor. By 27 BCE, Augustus had become the undisputed ruler of Rome, ending the civil wars and stabilizing the empire. He reformed the government, created a standing army, and established the foundations of what would become the Roman Empire. With the assassination of Julius Caesar, Rome found itself in turmoil. The Republic, though broken, had not yet fully yielded to the ambitions of its military leaders. Power shifted and swayed in the aftermath of Caesar's death, as the city was plunged into further civil conflict. Yet amidst this chaos, one man stood above the rest, poised to shape the future of Rome. That man was Augustus, Caesar's adopted son, who would go on to become the first Roman emperor and bring about the transformation of Rome from a republic to an empire. But what was it, listener, that allowed Augustus to rise to power when so many others had failed? Why was he able to succeed where Julius Caesar, despite his overwhelming strength, could not? Was it simply his family connection to Caesar, or was there something more? Perhaps it was his ability to navigate the complex political landscape of Rome. Augustus was not just a military commander. He was a master of political strategy, diplomacy, and, perhaps most importantly, patience. He understood that true power did not come from brute force alone. It came from subtlety, from presenting oneself as both a protector of the Republic and the inevitable leader of a new Roman world. Augustus carefully consolidated his power, positioning himself as the savior of Rome, the man who could restore stability to the fractured city-state. Yet, in doing so, he was not seeking to recreate the old republic. Instead, he carefully crafted a new system of governance, one that would allow him to maintain control while presenting an image of a restored republic. He cleverly balanced the old structures with new reforms, creating a facade of republican ideals while ensuring that he, as the emperor, held absolute power. It was a brilliant, if subtle, shift, a change that would secure his rule and lay the foundation for the Roman Empire. This period of transition was not without its challenges. The Roman people, who had long been accustomed to a system of shared power, were wary of a single ruler. Augustus faced opposition not only from his political rivals, but also from the public, who feared the loss of their freedom under an autocrat. But Augustus, with his keen understanding of Roman values and his ability to win the support of the masses, managed to quell these fears. He presented himself as the guardian of Roman tradition, a defender of the values that had made Rome great. Through his reforms, he stabilized the empire, expanded its borders, and solidified his authority, all while carefully avoiding the appearance of a tyrant. One of Augustus's most significant achievements was his ability to secure peace within the empire, a peace that would last for over 2 centuries. This period, known as the Pax Romana, Roman peace, allowed Rome to flourish economically, culturally, and politically. Augustus's reign marked the beginning of an era of relative stability where Roman law and infrastructure expanded and where the arts, architecture, and literature thrived. It was during this time that the Romans built monumental structures such as the Colosseum and the Pantheon that would stand as symbols of their power and creativity for centuries to come. But what, listener, is the true legacy of Augustus? Is it the monuments and the peace, or is it something deeper? The understanding that true leadership comes not from force, but from vision. Augustus understood that to create an empire that would last, he needed to do more than just win battles. He needed to inspire his people, to give them a sense of purpose and direction. And perhaps this more than anything is what made Augustus's reign so successful. He created a vision of Rome that was not just about power, but about identity. The Roman Empire was not simply a place of conquest. It was a place where people could feel part of something greater, something eternal. The reign of Augustus was the beginning of an era of unparalleled Roman dominance. Under his leadership, Rome reached the pinnacle of its power, and the seeds for the empire's continued expansion were firmly planted. Yet, Augustus's success also laid the groundwork for the challenges that would follow. The empire he created was vast, and with such vastness came the problems of maintaining order, of controlling distant provinces, and of ensuring the loyalty of his successors. Augustus understood that the empire's stability depended not just on military strength, but on a system of governance that could adapt to the needs of a changing world. It was a challenge that would continue to face the emperors who followed him. As Augustus passed from the scene, leaving behind a legacy that would define Rome for centuries to come, the world began to realize the true scope of what had been accomplished. Rome, once a small city-state, had become the heart of a vast empire that spanned continents. Augustus's reign marked not just the end of one era, but the beginning of another, an era where Rome's influence would echo across history. As the empire grew, so did the challenges it faced. Augustus may have established the foundations of imperial Rome, but the weight of running such a vast empire was far from easy. The vastness of the empire, its sprawling provinces, each with its unique culture and system of governance, meant that even the strongest of leaders would be tested. The Roman Empire had conquered many lands, but now it faced the challenge of maintaining control over those lands. Its borders stretched from the sands of North Africa to the misty hills of Britain, from the warm shores of Spain to the eastern deserts of Mesopotamia. Such a vast expanse could not be ruled by one man alone, and Augustus knew this well. He understood that the key to Rome's survival was not just military might, but the integration of its provinces into the Roman system. Rome's strength lay in its adaptability, and this is where its genius was evident. Unlike many empires of the ancient world, which sought to impose one uniform culture and set of laws, Rome allowed for a degree of local autonomy within its provinces. Local leaders were often allowed to maintain their positions of power, as long as they acknowledged Roman sovereignty. This approach, though not without its flaws, helped maintain peace in many of Rome's far-flung territories. It also allowed Rome to tap into the vast wealth and resources of its provinces, further strengthening its economy and military. But while this policy of integration brought many benefits, it also had its drawbacks. As the empire grew, so did its internal divisions. The sheer size of the Roman Empire made it difficult to govern, and local rivalries, corruption, and unrest began to surface. The Roman Senate, once the pillar of the Republic, was now largely reduced to a rubber-stamp institution, with most of the real power lying in the hands of the emperor. Yet even the emperor was not immune to the challenges of maintaining control. The Roman emperors faced constant threats from within and outside the empire, from rebellion and assassination to external invasions and economic instability. How then did Rome manage to survive these challenges for so long? It wasn't just through military might, though that was a crucial part of its survival. The Roman system of governance, though imperfect, was flexible enough to adapt to the changing circumstances of the empire. The emperors understood that stability required not just force, but a sense of continuity, a connection to the Roman identity that could be passed down through the generations. Even in the face of adversity, the spirit of Rome, its culture, its ideals, remained strong. The Roman people, though often facing hardships, continued to believe in their empire's destiny, and this belief became one of Rome's greatest strengths. Yet the challenges were relentless. The first few centuries of the Roman Empire were a time of prosperity and growth, but as the empire expanded, its problems became more complicated. The question of succession, once a matter of political maneuvering, now became a deadly game of intrigue and power struggles. Emperors were assassinated, generals rebelled, and foreign invaders began to push at the borders of the empire. In the 3rd century AD, the Roman Empire went through a period of intense crisis, known as the Crisis of the 3rd Century, where the empire was threatened by external invasions, internal revolts, and economic collapse. The empire seemed on the verge of collapse, yet, once again, the Romans showed their resilience. The eventual division of the Roman Empire into the Western and Eastern Roman Empires in 395 AD marked the beginning of a new phase in Roman history. The Western Roman Empire, though still powerful, began to weaken under the strain of economic problems, military overreach, and the pressure from barbarian invasions. In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire officially fell when the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. This event is often seen as the end of the ancient Roman Empire in the West. But the Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for almost another 1,000 years. The Byzantine Empire preserved much of Roman law, culture, and tradition, and its emperors saw themselves as the rightful heirs to Rome. The Byzantine Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, stood as a bulwark against invaders and a center of Christian culture and scholarship. So, what does Rome's story teach us, listener? What can we learn from the rise and fall of one of the most influential empires in history? Perhaps it is a reminder that even the greatest civilizations are not invulnerable. Empires rise and fall, but the ideas they create, the systems they build, and the culture they nurture can last far beyond their time. Rome, though it fell, left an indelible mark on the world, a mark that is still felt today in our laws, our architecture, our language, and our ideas about governance and citizenship. And so, as we reflect on the legacy of Rome, we remember that the story of Rome is not just a story of conquest and empire, but a story of resilience, adaptation, and transformation. It is a story that reminds us that greatness is not built overnight, and that even in the face of the greatest challenges, the spirit of a people can endure. As the centuries passed, the once mighty Roman Empire, with its vast territories and powerful military, began to fade. The Western Roman Empire, overwhelmed by invasions and internal instability, collapsed in 476 AD. Yet, as Rome fell, its legacy lived on. The ideas, laws, and cultural innovations of Rome did not disappear with the fall of the empire. Instead, they were carried forward, influencing civilizations for centuries to come. But what is it, listener, that makes an empire's legacy so enduring? What is it that allows the spirit of a civilization to transcend time and place, to echo through the ages? Is it their military conquests, their buildings, or their culture? Perhaps it is all of these, and more. It is the ideas that endure, the systems that outlast their creators, and the way a civilization shapes the very fabric of the world. Rome's influence can be seen in many aspects of the modern world. Take, for example, the concept of Roman law. The legal system that emerged from Rome's Republican Empire laid the foundation for many modern legal systems. The idea that a person is innocent until proven guilty, the concept of justice being blind, and the use of codified laws all trace their origins to ancient Roman society. These concepts have been adopted by many nations, from Europe to the Americas, and continue to shape the legal systems that govern our lives today. The Romans understood the importance of law in maintaining order, and they codified their laws in such a way that they could be applied uniformly to all citizens. This emphasis on justice, fairness, and equality before the law is one of Rome's most enduring legacies. In architecture too, Rome's influence is undeniable. The Romans perfected many building techniques that are still used today, such as the use of arches, vaults, and domes. The Colosseum, the Pantheon, and the Roman aqueducts stand as testaments to the Romans' engineering prowess. These structures were not just practical, they were works of art, designed to reflect the grandeur and strength of Rome. The grandeur of Roman architecture inspired future generations, and elements of Roman design can be found in countless buildings across the world. The use of arches in bridges, the creation of domed ceilings in churches, and the construction of grand public buildings all trace their origins back to Roman innovations. But it wasn't just the physical structures that Romans left behind. Their ideas about governance and citizenship also had a lasting impact on the world. The concept of a republic, where citizens have a say in their government, can be traced back to the Roman Republic. The idea that power should be checked and balanced, that leaders should be held accountable, and that the people should have a voice in how they are governed, all stemmed from Roman political thought. The Roman Senate, though flawed and eventually overshadowed by the emperors, served as a model for later democratic systems. The influence of Rome on the development of modern democracy is undeniable, and its ideas about citizenship, participation, and the role of government continue to resonate in political discourse around the world. The Romans did not just leave behind systems and structures, they left behind a culture, an identity that continues to shape the world today. Roman art, literature, and philosophy laid the foundations for the Western intellectual tradition. The works of Roman poets, such as Virgil and Ovid, and philosophers, such as Cicero and Seneca, continue to be studied and admired today. These works have influenced countless generations of writers, thinkers, and artists, and their themes of heroism, love, fate, and duty resonate across time and cultures. Roman culture was, in many ways, the bridge between the ancient world and the modern world, preserving and transmitting the ideas and knowledge of Greece and the Near East to the civilizations that followed. But perhaps the most profound legacy of Rome is the idea of empire itself. The Roman Empire was the first of its kind, a civilization that spanned continents, connected disparate peoples, and created a common identity that transcended borders. The idea of empire, of creating a vast network of territories that are united under a single government has influenced countless civilizations throughout history. From the Byzantine Empire to the British Empire, from the Ottoman Empire to the United States, the idea of empire continues to shape the world today. It was Rome that first demonstrated the potential of empire to unite and divide, to create prosperity and bring suffering, and to leave a mark on history that endures long after the empire itself has fallen. And yet, in the wake of Rome's collapse, its legacy did not die. The fall of the Roman Empire in the West in 476 AD marked the end of an era, but not the end of Roman influence. The Byzantine Empire, a continuation of the Eastern Roman Empire, carried on the traditions of Rome, preserving Roman law, culture, and scholarship. The rise of Christianity, which became the dominant religion of the empire, further ensured the survival of Roman ideas. The teachings of Roman philosophers and theologians shaped the development of Christian doctrine, and the Roman architectural style influenced the construction of churches and cathedrals throughout medieval Europe. As Europe entered the Middle Ages, the legacy of Rome lived on through the institutions of the church, the legal system, and the intellectual traditions that had been passed down through generations. The Renaissance, beginning in the 14th century, saw a revival of interest in Roman art, literature, and philosophy. The works of Roman poets, playwrights, and historians were rediscovered, and their ideas about governance, ethics, and society were studied and applied to the modern world. The Romans may have fallen, but their influence, like an ever-flowing river, continued to shape the course of history. As we look around us today, we see the enduring influence of Rome in our laws, our architecture, our language, and our culture. The Latin language, once spoken by the Romans, has influenced nearly every modern European language, and its roots can be found in the legal and scientific terminology we use every day. Roman law continues to be the foundation for much of the legal systems in the Western world, and Roman ideas about citizenship, governance, and civic duty continue to shape our notions of democracy and justice. So, what does this all mean for us, listener? What can we learn from the rise and fall of one of the greatest empires in history? Perhaps it is a reminder that even the greatest civilizations are not invulnerable. Empires rise and fall, but the ideas they create, the systems they build, and the culture they nurture can last far beyond their time. Rome, though it fell, left an indelible mark on the world, a mark that is still felt today in our laws, our architecture, our language, and our ideas about governance and citizenship. The story of Rome is not just a story of conquest, but a story of legacy, of enduring influence, and of the lasting power of ideas. Rome's fall in the West, marked by the deposition of Romulus Augustus in 476 AD, is often considered one of the most significant events in world history. But, listener, can we truly say that Rome fell, or did it simply evolve, transform, and adapt? Was there a singular moment of collapse, or was it a slow unraveling, a series of events that led to the empire's eventual disintegration? To understand the fall of Rome, we must look not only at the political and military factors, but also at the deeper currents that ran through Roman society. Rome was built on conquest and military dominance. The Roman legions, disciplined and formidable, had once swept across the known world. But as the empire expanded, the task of defending its vast borders became more difficult. The Roman military, though still powerful, faced mounting challenges from external invaders and internal unrest. The barbarians, once seen as scattered tribes, now coalesced into powerful forces capable of breaching the once impenetrable walls of the empire. The Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths began to encroach on Roman territory, seizing lands that were once under Roman control. Yet, it was not only external forces that weakened the empire. internal decay played a critical role as well. Corruption within the Roman political system was one of the most insidious causes of Rome's decline. The Senate, once a powerful body that represented the will of the Roman people, had become a shadow of its former self. Political infighting and corruption weakened the Republic and, later, the Empire. The emperors, though powerful, were often subject to the whims of military leaders, and the system of succession was fraught with instability. As the empire grew, it became increasingly difficult to maintain a sense of unity and coherence among its diverse provinces. The once strong ties between the military and the political elite began to fray, and loyalty to the emperor began to wane. With the constant turnover of emperors, often through violent means, the unity of the empire became increasingly fragile. But what about the people of Rome, listener? What role did they play in the empire's decline? The Roman citizenry, once proud and industrious, began to suffer under the weight of constant warfare and political instability. The Roman economy, once thriving, began to falter. Inflation, heavy taxation, and a reliance on slave labor all took their toll on the empire's ability to function. As the empire grew more dependent on mercenaries, its military strength began to weaken. The loyalty of the legions was no longer to Rome itself, but to the highest bidder. And what of the common people? Many of them, disillusioned by the endless cycles of war and corruption, began to turn inward, losing faith in the empire that had once promised them prosperity and security. The emergence of Christianity during this period added another layer of complexity to the fall of Rome. Once persecuted, Christianity had grown in influence and power within the empire. The rise of Christianity, particularly after Emperor Constantine's conversion and the subsequent establishment of Christianity as the state religion, changed the cultural fabric of Rome. Christianity, with its emphasis on spiritual salvation over worldly power, provided an alternative to the traditional Roman values of glory and conquest. For some, the rise of Christianity symbolized the decline of the old Roman world and the beginning of a new era, an era focused more on the spiritual and moral than on the martial and imperial. Yet, despite all these internal and external pressures, Rome did not simply disappear. The city of Rome itself, the heart of the empire, was no longer the center of power, but it remained an important symbolic and cultural hub. Even after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the influence of Rome endured, carried forward by the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, which continued to thrive for another 1,000 years. The Byzantine Empire preserved much of Roman law, culture, and administration, acting as the bridge between the ancient world and the Renaissance that would later emerge in the West. Even after the Western Empire's fall, the influence of Roman law, Roman architecture, and Roman ideals continued to shape the world. The idea of a republic, the belief in citizenship, and the Roman concept of law were adopted by many of the emerging nations of Europe. The Renaissance, beginning in the 14th century, saw a revival of interest in Roman art, architecture, and philosophy. Scholars of the time looked to ancient Roman texts, and Roman ideals of humanism, civic virtue, and leadership became central to the intellectual movement. Rome's fall may have marked the end of its political dominance, but the spirit of Rome lived on, influencing cultures, nations, and individuals for centuries to come. The Romans had left an indelible mark on the world, and that mark would continue to guide the course of history. Even as the Western Empire crumbled, Rome's legacy lived on in the very institutions that had been built on its foundations. The Roman idea of governance, the Roman system of law, and the Roman vision of empire would influence the world for generations to come. So, listener, what does the fall of Rome teach us? Perhaps it teaches us that no empire, no matter how powerful, is invincible. It reminds us that all civilizations must adapt to changing circumstances or risk falling into decline, but it also teaches us something more, something hopeful. Even after the fall of the greatest empire the world had ever known, its influence persisted. Rome's ideas lived on, carried by those who came after, shaping the future in ways the Romans themselves could never have imagined. In the end, it was not just the fall of Rome that mattered, but how its legacy continued to resonate through time, across borders, and through the generation. As the centuries passed, the once glorious city of Rome, the heart of the empire, was left in ruins. Yet in a way, the spirit of Rome never truly disappeared. The empire may have crumbled, but the ideas and institutions that Rome gave birth to continue to resonate long after its political fall. The concept of empire itself, the vision of a vast, interconnected world united under one banner, became a model for countless civilizations that followed. From the Byzantine Empire in the east to the Holy Roman Empire in the west, from the Spanish Empire to the British Empire, the idea of empire, of Roman-style governance, lived on. What is it, listener, that makes an empire so enduring? Why do some empires fade into obscurity while others leave an indelible mark on history? Perhaps it is the values they leave behind, the vision they inspire in the generations that follow. The Roman Empire was built on strength, but also on ideas. Ideas about governance, citizenship, law, and identity. Rome taught the world that empires could be built not only through military conquest, but also through the creation of a shared cultural identity. The Roman Empire was not just a collection of territories, it was a world united by a common language, a common set of laws, and a shared sense of Roman identity. But as the Roman Empire faded into history, the question arose: what happens to an empire once it has fallen? Is its legacy only a shadow of what it once was? Or does its influence continue to shape the world in subtle and lasting ways? The fall of Rome in the West, marked by the deposition of Romulus Augustus in 476 AD, did not signal the end of the Roman influence. On the contrary, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where Rome's ideals and culture continued to echo across the world. In the wake of Rome's fall, its intellectual and cultural legacy was preserved by scholars, theologians, and thinkers throughout Europe. The monasteries of the Middle Ages became centers of learning, where monks copied Roman texts and preserved the knowledge of the ancient world. The Latin language, once the lingua franca of the empire, continued to be used in religious and scholarly circles, ensuring that Roman culture would not be forgotten. And it was in the Roman Catholic Church, which had grown in power and influence during the empire's decline, that the spiritual and cultural legacy of Rome found a new home. The Church not only preserved Roman traditions, but also became the institution that carried the torch of Roman civilization into the medieval period. But while the intellectual and cultural legacy of Rome was preserved, the empire itself had been replaced by new political systems. The idea of empire, as it had been understood in the Roman sense, underwent a transformation. The Byzantine Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, continued the legacy of the Roman emperors, preserving much of Roman law, culture, and administration. However, it was also a distinctly different empire, one that adapted Roman ideas to the changing political and religious landscape of the East. The Byzantine Empire would last for nearly 1,000 years after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, serving as a bridge between the ancient world and the Renaissance that would later emerge in the West. In the West, the fall of the Roman Empire led to the rise of new kingdoms and empires. The Holy Roman Empire, founded by Charlemagne in the 9th century, sought to revive the Roman idea of a unified Christian empire in the West. Though it was never a true continuation of the Roman Empire, it nonetheless drew inspiration from Roman governance, law, and administration. As Europe entered the medieval period, the memory of Rome and its legacy shaped the way that rulers and governments viewed their own power. The idea of the Roman Empire as a symbol of power and unity continued to inspire political leaders throughout Europe. The Renaissance, which began in the 14th century, marked the next great revival of Roman culture. Scholars, artists, and thinkers looked back to the classical world for inspiration, rediscovering the works of Roman poets, philosophers, and historians. The Renaissance saw a resurgence of Roman ideals, especially the concepts of civic virtue, republicanism, and humanism. This cultural revival, rooted in the study of ancient Rome, had a profound impact on the development of modern Western thought and society. The Renaissance artists and architects, for example, drew directly from Roman art and architecture, creating works that reflected the grandeur of the ancient world. But the legacy of Rome was not confined to Europe. The idea of empire, of creating a vast, interconnected world, was passed down through the ages. The expansion of European powers in the Age of Exploration, from the Spanish to the British empires, was in many ways an attempt to recreate the Roman model of global dominance. Even in the modern era, the United States, with its ideals of democracy and republicanism, has drawn inspiration from the Roman Republic, adapting Roman ideas of citizenship and governance to its own political system. As we reflect on Rome's legacy, it becomes clear that its influence is not confined to any one time or place. The Roman Empire, despite its fall, continues to shape the world in profound ways. It taught the world about the power of law, the importance of governance, and the value of culture. Its political systems, military strategies, and ideas about empire have been studied, adapted, and transformed by civilizations throughout history. And perhaps most importantly, Rome taught the world that greatness is not just about conquest. It is about creating a civilization that endures, that leaves a lasting mark on the world. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD marked the end of one of the greatest civilizations in history, but it did not mark the end of Rome's influence. In fact, the influence of Rome, like a thread woven into the very fabric of history, continued to run through the Middle Ages and beyond. The idea of Rome as the model of civilization and empire persisted, even as the empire itself faded into the annals of time. This legacy would not only influence Europe, but would also extend to the Americas, where Roman ideals were reinterpreted and revitalized by new generations. Rome's legacy can be seen in the very foundations of Western civilization. Its laws, its sense of justice, and its emphasis on citizenship provided the framework for modern legal systems. The concept of jus civile, civil law, which the Romans developed, became the basis for many modern legal codes, including the Napoleonic Code and the civil law systems of many countries in Europe and Latin America. The idea that laws should apply equally to all citizens, regardless of their wealth or status, was a cornerstone of Roman society that continues to shape our modern notions of equality and justice. But the influence of Rome was not limited to its laws. The Roman system of government, based on a senate, elected officials, and a system of checks and balances, provided a model for the formation of modern democracies. While the Roman Republic was far from perfect, its system of governance, with its emphasis on representation and accountability, would go on to inspire the founding principles of many modern republics, including the United States. The very concept of civitas, citizenship, that the Romans embraced continues to inform our ideas about participation in the political process. The Romans also left an indelible mark on art, architecture, and literature. Roman architecture, with its grand public buildings, basilicas, and temples, set the stage for the development of European architecture during the Renaissance. The use of arches, vaults, and domes, perfected by the Romans, continues to influence modern building designs. The grandeur of Roman public works, such as the Colosseum and the aqueducts, serves as a testament to their engineering brilliance. Even today, when we visit ancient Roman ruins, we are reminded of the incredible vision and skill that built the empire. In literature, Roman poets, playwrights, and historians have shaped the Western literary tradition. The works of Virgil, Ovid, and Cicero remain foundational texts in the study of literature, philosophy, and rhetoric. Roman poets explored themes of heroism, fate, and love, universal themes that continue to resonate with readers today. The stories of the Aeneid, Metamorphoses, and Cicero's speeches were not just tales from the past. They were moral lessons, guides to living a virtuous life, and reflections on human nature. These works laid the groundwork for much of Western thought and continue to be studied and admired. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of Rome is its role as a cultural and intellectual bridge between the ancient world and the modern world. The Roman Empire was the conduit through which Greek philosophy, science, and art were preserved and passed on to later generations. The works of Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle were translated and studied in the Roman world, where they were further developed and integrated into Roman thought. When the Roman Empire fell, much of this intellectual heritage was preserved in the Byzantine Empire, where Greek and Roman learning flourished. As Europe entered the Middle Ages, the influence of Rome continued through the Christian Church. The Church, which had grown in power during the decline of the empire, inherited much of Rome's intellectual and cultural heritage. Roman law, literature, and philosophy were preserved in the monastic libraries of the early Middle Ages, where scholars copied ancient manuscripts and kept Roman learning alive. The Church also became the institution that provided a sense of continuity in the face of the empire's collapse, preserving Roman traditions and helping to spread them throughout Europe. And when the Renaissance arrived in the 14th century, it was in Rome that scholars and artists turned to rediscover the classical world. The Renaissance was a revival of the ancient world's ideals, inspired by the rediscovery of Roman art, literature, and philosophy. Renaissance artists like Michelangelo and Raphael, inspired by Roman ideals of beauty and harmony, created masterpieces that would define the future of Western art. Roman architecture, sculpture, and painting became the model for the Renaissance, as artists and architects sought to recapture the grandeur of ancient Rome. Rome's influence did not stop with the Renaissance. As European explorers embarked on voyages to the New World, they carried with them the ideas and values of the Roman Empire. The age of exploration, colonialism, and the rise of European powers was, in many ways, a continuation of the Roman imperial ideal. The expansion of European empires across the globe was not just about territorial conquest. It was about spreading Roman ideas of governance, culture, and law to new lands. Even in the modern era, Rome's legacy continues to shape the world. The United States, with its system of government and its ideals of democracy and citizenship, has been profoundly influenced by Rome's republic and empire. The Roman legal system provided the foundation for the legal codes of many countries, and the Roman concept of citizenship and the rights of individuals continues to shape modern political thought. Rome's culture, its art, and its architecture continue to be admired and emulated across the world. The influence of Rome is inescapable, embedded in the very fabric of modern civilization, resting with the ancient spirits. As the story of Rome, a tale of rise, triumph, and eventual decline, comes to a close, we are reminded that even the greatest empires, no matter how magnificent or powerful, must eventually face their end. Yet, the legacy of Rome is not confined to the dust of history. It lives on, woven into the very fabric of our modern world. From the laws that govern our lives to the ideals of democracy and justice that we hold dear, Rome's influence is still felt today. The lessons that the Romans left behind, of resilience in the face of adversity, of the power of unity, and of the importance of cultural exchange, continue to resonate in every corner of the world. But dear listener, as you drift into the realm of sleep tonight, I invite you to take a moment to reflect not only on the grandeur of Rome, but on the more personal aspects of its story. For in the end, it is not just the conquest of lands or the building of great monuments that makes a civilization memorable. It is the spirit, the values, and the lessons that it imparts to those who follow. Rome's story is, in many ways, a story of us all. We too build legacies, sometimes in ways we don't even realize, often through our actions, our relationships, and the ideals we uphold. As you rest, consider the legacies we each leave behind in our own small ways. Like the Roman Empire, we too are in a constant state of evolution, each of us carving out our place in the vast tapestry of history. Some legacies are big, others small, but all are meaningful in the grand design of the world. So, in your dreams tonight, may you find comfort in knowing that even in moments of quiet, even in rest, you are part of something much larger than yourself. And so, as the moonlight gently bathes the world outside, take a moment to feel the presence of those who came before. The Romans, the thinkers, the warriors, the architects of civilization. Feel their quiet whispers, their timeless lessons, flowing through your dreams like the river of time, unbroken and eternal. Rome may no longer stand as an empire, but its spirit, its legacy, and its story continue to live in each of us. As you sleep tonight, let the dreams of ancient cities, vast empires, and monumental achievements settle softly into your mind. Let them be your lullaby, wrapping you in the warmth of shared human experience and ambition. Let the Roman legacy be a gentle reminder that, no matter where we come from, we are all part of this beautiful, interconnected journey. So now, dear listener, close your eyes. Breathe deeply. The Empire of Rome may be long gone, but its story will continue to echo like the soft murmur of the wind across the vast lands it once ruled. Sleep now, knowing that you too are part of the ever-flowing stream of history. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the wisdom of the ages, with the courage of warriors, and the vision of emperors. Sweet dreams, and may you wake with a sense of peace, knowing that the spirit of Rome, in all its glory, still whispers in the quiet moments of your life.